This is Julia Arnott, and Julia is about to start a journey with a venture called Rekindle. And the idea of Rekindle is to divert wood waste from demolition sites from landfill and turn it into beautiful New Zealand design and crafted furniture. And then she wants to use that process to equip disadvantaged youth with skills and jobs, and also find a way to reinvest some of the profit from that back into the community. So I think this is a really, really good idea. And I also think it's a really good example of what social enterprise is. So what I want to talk about is why social enterprise is a good idea and how we can get more of it. So to make the case for social enterprise, I think I just want to take some time to think about where we are right now. We live in an incredible world. We live at an incredible time. We never had so much choice, so much opportunity, and such capability. So we can travel anywhere in the world pretty much in 24 hours. We can look back in time to the start of the universe. We can purchase for more than 10 billion products from an integrated global economy. Individually, we can choose from any career, interests, profession. And in New Zealand, we've got health, clean water, and energy on tap. We're starting to make the things that we thought were impossible, the stuff of science fiction, possible. Teleport. Okay, we're not moving people around yet, but they're moving molecules. Invisibility. Done. They're bending light around objects. But amidst all this, I think it's easy to forget or perhaps take for granted how quickly things are changing, and how interconnected things have become, and how complex they are. So, who knows what this is? Yeah, well, it's the first website in the world. Who knows when it went live? Okay, 21 years ago. Now, I'm not an old man, but I was smoking and going to gigs 20 years ago. And in 20 years, this has turned from a curiosity to something which has fundamentally changed the way we do things, the way we connect, the way we talk to each other, the way we think. And the world's changing in other ways as well. This year in March, our global population tipped over 7 billion. That's twice as many people that were in the world when I was born. Twice. Half the world lives in cities, half the world is under 25. And the important thing here is it means we're consuming resources at a rate which is completely unprecedented. Simplistically, this plays out in two ways. One, we're becoming more extreme in the way that we capture and exploit resources. And this is risky, and you kind of see this with Deepwater Horizon. The other thing is we're taking so much out of the system that we're starting to undermine the basic support systems that enable us to get by and do what we want. So the systems which purify air and water, the systems which provide biodiversity, pollination, the systems that protect us from natural hazards, pests, disease, the systems that provide basic materials and basic food systems to sustain us. And we don't know where the breaking points are. And we really don't know what the impacts are going to be either. But we are starting to see the climate system flex its muscles. So this year, only a couple of months ago, the Arctic sea ice got to the lowest level on records. The orange line is the average low point for the last 30 years, and you can see it's considerably less than that. Since the middle of last century, incidents of weather-related natural disasters have increased by over 1,000%. We can argue about climate change, and we can discuss where the safe limits, are, but this reminds us that we just simply can't negotiate with a planet. It doesn't speak English, and it's much bigger than us. So it's not just in the physical world that we've got trauma. We're also in the middle of a global financial crisis. And no one really knows how this is going to play out. Not least because the theory that we use to construct it is proven defunct. Inequality. 80% of countries around the world, income gaps are growing. 1 billion children. Half the children in the world grow up in poverty. This diagram gives a crude representation of how the wealth in the world is distributed. The richest fifth, about 75%. The bottom, 1.5%. Credit Suisse reckon the top wealthiest, 1,000 individuals, have a wealth equivalent to the bottom 2.5 billion. That's nuts. It's a common sense view says that this is unstable, it's unsustainable, and to be honest, it's downright unacceptable. Here in New Zealand, inequality is growing faster than any other developed country. So too many of the vital indicators which will ensure us to have a healthy, stable, sustainable future are tracking in the wrong way. And to top it all, we're just not as smart as we think we are. We're really good at the geeky stuff. We can do warp drives, we can print cars, but complex relationships, not so good. But we consistently overestimate our ability to predict and manage the monsters we're creating. So there's this guy called Philip Tetlock who basically wanted to understand how often experts get things right. Okay, we live in an expert-dominated world. How often do they actually really get things right? And he really wanted to know. And he did a research piece over 20 years, looked at 28,000 predictions from experts. Guess how often experts get it right? In short, they don't. Marginally above a random outcome. Other studies show us that what we think we know and what we do know are completely out of sync. And if you want evidence for that, just go down to a pub quiz. So we're living in a very complex world. We're too damn cocky and we're starting to become dangerous. And we're starting to see this gap. A gap between what we want, and I generally believe it's what we all want, but where we're actually going, where our attitudes and behaviours are taking us. It's what Matthew Taylor from the Royal Society of the Arts in London has called the aspiration gap. And I believe if we want to bridge this gap, we've got to start rethinking our relationship to the world. And specifically, we've got to rework the way that we define, create, and retain value. And this is where social enterprise comes in, because it gives us a real and definite model of how we can do things very differently, sacrificing very little and gaining much. And this is how it works. So social enterprise gives us a platform to be completely unreasonable. We can challenge the assumptions about how the world works. Not just do things differently in terms of being smarter, but just turning paradigms upside down. So this is Muhammad Yunus, the grandfather of microfinance. And his unreasonable idea was to bring people out of entrenched poverty by lending them money without guarantees. Completely different from the way that the banking system works. And it was so unreasonable that he had to do the first loans out of his own pocket. He gave $27 away. Grameen Bank has now lent more than $11 billion. It's brought millions of people out of poverty. It's diversified into education, technology, housing. Social enterprises focus on a genuine need. They don't just manufacture it. So, does anybody want to have a guess about what this is? Clearly a football, but it's also a power plant. Socket. It addresses the need that 25% of the children of the world don't have access to electricity. They don't get access for light to read or do their homework. So what 4 undergraduate students from Harvard University have done is they know all children love to play, and in return for 15 minutes of kicking a football round, they get 3 hours of power. Ingenious, fun, but certainly not frivolous. Social enterprises focus on creating value rather than merely profit, which means they can go to places where conventional businesses don't. So this is the One World Health Institute. And they are addressing the failure that only 10% of the total global health research and development budget goes into addressing the conditions which generate 90% of the world's disease burden. In short, the medical game serves the rich and not the poor. But because they've got no competition in working with or for the poor, it means they can do other things. And they specialize in taking off-patent drugs and going through rapid development and rolling them out very cost-effectively. They've sacrificed margin for market scale. And because they focus on their stakeholders rather than their shareholders, it means they can provide value to the majority of people rather than a privileged few. Social enterprises instinctively think holistically. They know how to play the system. This story is much closer to home, and it's one that we can be proud of because it was Wellington started. Conscious consumers. What conscious consumers do is they work with retail businesses to improve their environmental and ethical performance. And beyond the intrinsic benefits that those businesses get from being more efficient, conscious consumers then market those businesses to a growing network of people who want to buy from businesses that are doing the right thing. Then they get more businesses on board and they go up the supply chain. They get stuff for cheaper and they introduce new products. It's not so much a win-win, but a win-win-win-win-win-win-win. Okay? Thinking holistically and understanding that value can be shared. Social enterprises are also fundamentally built on collaboration and empowerment. Okay, so it's about maximizing participation rather than just managing performance. Cafe Direct is a business built on collaboration. It's also the 5th biggest coffee brand in the UK. They see fair trade as an absolute minimum standard, and they invest a huge amount of their profits back into the communities that supply them with the product. Beyond it being a good thing to do, it's also a sensible thing to do, because they are securing supply, they're guaranteeing a high quality crop, and because of the relationship they built with the communities, they understand very quickly about where the opportunities for innovation are. The social capital that Cafe Direct have generated is so strong that the German Development Agency now run their development programs through Cafe Direct's networks. So a business based on collaboration has now become a platform for wider development. Open source solutions. So social enterprises usually, most of the time, have a very different relationship to intellectual property. They just want to get the job done. So they don't mind sharing it with others who can do it and get the job done quicker. Another one that's just much closer to home, this is Bevan, and Bevan's about to pilot the first on-demand public transport system in the country. Okay, an area of New Zealand, no public transport. You have to get around in cars or you don't get around at all. But by intelligently using simple technology, this bus, rather than just going from A to B, can serve a much wider community. Customers go up, subsidies go down. If this works, it could be big news for a lot of areas in New Zealand. But I know Bevan. He's not after a national franchise. He just wants to get the job done. And like all game-changing ideas, social enterprise use models which can be scaled or can be replicated. We're becoming increasingly excited about the opportunity around community energy. It's taken off all around the world. It's just starting to happen here. So this is a story about energy, about clean energy, but it's also an organizing principle. It brings communities together and strengthens local governance. And when it works, it provides a sustainable revenue stream which they can use to invest in what they ever like. And if you want to get an idea about the potential of this, there's a town in Germany of about 2,500 people that export 4 million euros worth of energy a year. And it's completely changed the makeup of their skills, jobs, and cohesiveness around families staying together. So social enterprise is a hybrid model that provides us new opportunities to create value and retain it in different ways. And there's a heap of opportunities and challenges out there, as we've seen. But why don't we have more of them? Well, largely it's an issue around we just don't have the supporting infrastructure for them. It's a new idea. So we haven't built the supporting infrastructure, particularly around finance and funding, to enable them to really grow. Social enterprises usually don't get traction from the business community because the rates of return aren't what they are expected. Or business investors might get frightened off at the fact that they want to reinvest their profits to deliver mission or share it with the people that they serve. On the other side, you're ruled out from public and philanthropic funds sometimes if you're simply not a charity. And beyond that, those funds can be oversubscribed, bureaucratic, periodic, not really suited if you're an entrepreneur trying to do something very quickly. And beyond that, they don't like risk. You know, they're not going to use public money on things which haven't been proven before. So a whole heap of ideas are out there, but they're falling by the wayside because we don't have the infrastructure to support them. Right from the early stage where seed funding is so important, advice and the right networks, right up to the point of securing larger blocks of capital to grow things and take things to scale. But that's okay, because we can build that infrastructure. And It's not perfect, and taking the point earlier, it won't be appropriate for New Zealand. We'll have to do it our own way. But by looking at the infrastructure which has been developed in the UK around social enterprise, we can at least see some of the components which make something coherent and work right from the early stage up to the larger stages at scale. So firstly, government does have a role, but it's an office which works across government that understands and advocates for social enterprise. You have arm's length organisations which provide long-term funding for partnerships, education, social innovation. You have a legal form which works for social enterprise rather than against it. You have things like social return on investment, new forms of new currency which enable the value which is created by social enterprises to be traded. Incubators, unlimited, intelligently invest in seed funding but also providing the right advice and mentoring. Later on, impact investment funds, social finance, and then even above that, social finance wholesalers. Lovely story about Big Society Capital, that they raised £400 million by finding dormant bank accounts that hadn't been used for 15 years, and they put it to work. So there's ways to actually find money within the system without it necessarily having to be a cost. And even right at the top, mainstream institutions like the Cooperative Bank, understanding how these things work and getting involved, and the work they're doing around community energy is breathtaking. So we've got a bit of work to do, and we can't do it all at once. But if we have to start somewhere, it has to be, in my belief, focusing on the incubators and freeing up seed funding to get things going. By doing that, we mobilise talent, we create a pipeline of ventures, and we drive all the other elements that start to be formed around those elements. And this is what we're looking to do. We're looking to work with government and business and anyone here that's interested to raise a seed fund, a New Zealand seed fund of social enterprise of at least $10 million next year. So there's a fair bit of work to do there, and I'd best shut up and get on with it. But in summary, okay, this TEDx was about cool. And what I think is really cool is people looking after the place and looking after each other and finding ways to create wealth which sustain us rather than divide us. I hope social enterprise isn't called social enterprise in 20 years. I hope social enterprise is called enterprise. I was never an environmentalist, and I even call myself the reluctant environmentalist now, but I work with these issues because for me it's just a point of common sense. The economy exists within society, which exists within physical limits. If we break those boundaries, if we soil the nest, everything else becomes really, really difficult. We live in an absolutely wonderful world. We live in an incredibly exciting time, and how it goes from here is fundamentally our choice, your choice, and the decisions we make. And I think it's a really sensible idea to start being a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more humble, stop wrecking the place, be kinder, and start acting like we want to stick around. What do you think? Thank you.